Welcome back to our summary study of the Brhad Bhagavatamrta given to us by Sanatana Goswami. Now, we're in chapter 5, part 2. This video will finish chapter 5. And we left off, there's a conversation between Narada Muni, Gopa-kumara, and Uddhava. They are currently at Uddhava's house. Narada Muni has been discussing about how amongst human beings they're civilized, uncivilized, and he's working his way up to show amongst all the living entities how rare it is for those to achieve the heavenly planets, or even beyond the material world into Vaikuntha, or even Ayodhya or Dwarka. But even more rare is it to achieve Goloka Vrndavan. So he's been explaining that. And now he's got to the residents of Goloka, and even among them, there's differences of levels of prema. He says, we left off at text 181 and 182. It said, among some of the devotees of Sri Madan Gopal, there are further distinctions still, but I am unfit to describe them. And so then Narada Muni, he turns to Uddhava, and he embraces Uddhava and begged him with great humility and in a plaintive, prayerful voice. He says, please tell us something about this. Now, Uddhava had spent some time in Goloka. Krishna had sent him there as a messenger. And Krishna knew that without Uddhava experiencing it firsthand, he would never be able to understand how great the love these residents of Vrndavan had. Uddhava explains the glories of the women of Vrndavan. And he explains that Krishna's queens, they can't even come close to be compared to the gopis. And then Narada Muni even brings up in Srimad Bhagavatam where Bhishma himself, at the time of passing, praised the Lord by telling of the excellence of those young gopis in Vrndavan. Narada continued. He said, this subject should always be kept private, to be spoken only to saintly devotees, and it should especially be avoided in places where the Lord's supreme opulence is displayed. Narada Muni previously explained to Gopa-kumara that at their last meeting, when he was talking about, there were certain subject matters when they were in Vaikuntha that he didn't want to discuss. But now that he's in the current situation he's in now in Dwarka, then these more private matters can be spoken. So Narada spoke this subject at this time because of Gopa-kumara's current state of sadhana. Narada suggested that he go to Sri Purushottama Kshetra, which he had visited before. Go back there and continue to perform sadhana. Even if you're not satisfied after going there, stay there for some time and perform sadhana and achieve your desired goal. In text 215 to 234, he teaches this sadhana. He teaches how prema is given, different types of ways it's given. And then he gets into a discussion about humility. There's material humility and spiritual humility. And then how that is connected with prema. Now he says that, but the prime cause of Rajas prema is Krishna's full mercy, which in someone may arise suddenly, and in someone by gradual sadhana. Again, It may rise suddenly, and then some through gradual sadhana. This is very nice, this section here. Sanatana Goswami gets into this a little bit and reiterates the same thing that Narada Muni explains. And there's examples, like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Shivananda Sain's dog, they were on their way to see Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagannath Puri. So all those residents of Nimai's childhood at Mayapur, they're all headed to Jagannath Puri. And one of those persons that were coming, actually not a person, a dog, was also traveling with them. It was a Shivananda Sain's dog. But at one point there was a separation, and the dog actually made it there before them. But then the Lord bestowed His mercy on this dog and gave him prema. And an airplane came and took this dog. So here's an instance where suddenly someone got Krishna's mercy. Now, he uses the analogy to help also illustrate this. He says, just as a generous donor might receive food already cooked, or the means or the ingredients for cooking the foods oneself. So similarly, someone can give you the plate of food, it's already cooked, already prepared, or they can give you all the ingredients, all the recipe, the spices, the fuel, the pots, the pans, everything it takes, along with the instructions on how to prepare that same meal. But the result is the same. It says, it is given to a person according to what is suitable for that person. The same applies to mercy. The steps and the method for attaining Krishna's great mercy are explained according to the scriptures. Now he continues, once one has overcome the obstacles on the path that arises from the frailties like fear, one can achieve prema in which one thinks of the Lord like a close friend in the ordinary world. For this, one must have a strong desire to serve the Lord in a manner of His gopas and gopis. So, overcoming fear is an obstacle that each sadhaka has to deal with. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni discusses this when he got the mercy of these sages. And as a young boy, he headed off on his own. The first thing he had to deal with and overcome was fear. And then once he overcome fear and was completely dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it had an impact on his sadhana. And Bhaktisiddhanta, also in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, in his commentaries, he points out that after studying all this literature, if one is still afraid to die, they have simply wasted their time. Here again, given some importance to overcoming that obstacle of fear and having taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Narada continues, he says, one develops that prema by practicing bhakti, whose main ways are meditation and singing about the many Vraja pastimes of the Lord. That service becomes brilliant by sankirtan of the Lord's holy names and glorification of His devotees. Now, prema always appears in the company of people who only desire prema. So therefore, we have to, as we continue with our sadhana, associate with those individuals who often have a big desire to have prema. And because the association makes a big difference. And the quality of that association also makes a big difference. It says it develops soon when one always resides in seclusion in the forest of Vrndavan. By going to Vrndavan and performing sadhana, it magnifies that bhakti, that practice there. Now, Narada Muni starts talking about humility. He first describes a material humility, and he also explains that this humility is actually a prerequisite for prema. Material humility is something that we need to practice and we need to develop. And there's some humility that's not really humility, it's false humility. He says, wise men define humility as the state in which one always thinks oneself exceptionally incapable and low, even when endowed with all excellences. So this is the definition that he's given here. Sanatana Goswami in his commentary, he says the word humility, dayanya, implies poverty, being penniless, by refusing charity, or even without pride. By humility, one will always think of oneself as extraordinarily incapable of doing anything very low. Now he speaks here about even there's some false humility. He said this will happen even by laziness, by giving up pious acts, and by engaging in impious acts. Now he goes on, he said, that person is endowed with all good qualities. He is humble or most miserable, which cause him to cry, by considering fear of samsara, and because he lacks pride because of observing the rules and regulations. Now, an intelligent person should carefully cultivate speech, behavior, and thinking, by which he will be fixed in utter humility and the steadiness, and anything that stands in the way of it should be avoided. It's described here as humility and then utter humility. There's the difference. Now, this utter humility is described. It says, dayanya, at its most exalted form, comes forth when prema reaches full maturity, as it did with the women of Gokul, when they were separated from Krishna. Sanatana Goswami lists some examples of that and symptoms. The best humility arises by maturity of prema, by being fixed completely in special bhav for the Lord. Generally, everyone is in separation from Krishna, but such humility does not manifest since they lack prema. Thus, they will never destroy suffering and attain happiness. The previous type of humility explained was inferior to the present type. So, two different types of humility. Normal humility that we try to develop in our sadhana, that'll bring us to this platform of bhava. And then there's this utter humility that comes with prema. Where does this prema arise? What is it like? Is it like that of Radha and others, caused by separation when Krishna went to Mathura? That special humility arises in separation from the manifestation of the special prema with experience of Krishna's sweetness and by the special mercy of Krishna. There will be various levels of humility according to the level of prema. Humility is a result of fixed prema. Even after one achieves prema, there's a continuing stages of prema. So, practicing humility properly, one develops proper humility. Now, continuing, he says, when humility fully matures, prema unfolds without limit. So we see humility and prema acting in a relationship in which each is both cause and effect. Prema has humility as its essence, since prema produces humility. It is difficult to speak about something that you can only experience. We're getting the best description we can from Narada Muni, and also Sanatana Goswami, who is a Nityasiddha, who has actually experienced this type of humility, so they can, to an extent, help us understand. But certainly there's some things you just have to experience. You know, what does chocolate taste like? Or what is a mango compared to an orange without actually tasting them? It's hard to understand. He says, when prema matures, one inevitably acts from time to time in the ways of an utter madman. And without such prema, not even the 9 kinds of bhakti, the Lord Mukunda, can bring real happiness. And now there's some examples. This is, indeed, without prema, the 9 kinds of bhakti are like vegetables without salt, an elaborate meal without hunger, scriptural study without understanding, or gardens without fruit. It says that when Krishna went to Mathura, the gopis were plunged at once in a state more intense than the fire of universal devastation. Here's a description, but it's at the same time indescribable, this mood of separation. We learned at the end of part 1 of Bhagavatamrta that Krishna was trying to explain to his wives this mood of separation, this love that these residents had. Text 33, Narada says, if you ever meet Radhika, then you will see prema in person. If ever she speaks about prema, only then can you hear the truth about it, if you are able to understand it. So go to Jagannath's abode and fulfill your desire, he tells him. And by seeing Jagannath's lotus face there, by getting plenty of Mahaprasad, and by enjoying his frequent festivals and processions, you will certainly feel great delight in your heart, but not humility. This comes from Krishna in Goloka. Without utter humility, the pure love that leads to the entrance into Goloka will never arise. And until persons attain that world, he will never be happy. Now, Narada speaks to Uddhava. He said, Lord Purushottama, who feels sympathy for the distress, will surely send him again to Goloka. Then why not just go there directly? Gopa-kumara, he said that Narada again looked all around and he beheld all types of auspicious signs. That all-knowing sage and dear friend of the devotees then addressed me joyfully. He said that I think that all this has occurred just to deepen your prema for those 2 lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So he says, now go quickly to Vrajabhumi of Mathura district, which enhances the fame and splendor of the earth. Go fulfill your desire you have held so long. There, without delay, you will surely succeed in sadhana that will bring you to the brilliant world above Vaikuntha, Sri Goloka. So Narada, so pleased by Narada's nectarian words, Gopa-kumara speaking to this Mathura Brahmin, so I was eager to go to Vrajabhumi, but Uddhava perceived that within my heart I was anxious first to take the Lord's permission. And Uddhava says, don't worry about taking the Lord's permission. If you were to go anywhere else, that would be the proper thing to do. But because you're going to Vrndavan, you already have his mercy. He knows your heart. So Gopa-kumara is said, filled with the highest ecstasy from drinking the immortal nectar of Uddhava's words, I seemed to lose consciousness. For a moment I closed my eyes, sensing that someone had taken me elsewhere. I then opened my eyes and I saw that I had been brought to this grove. That ends chapter 5. He's still continuing to talk to this Mathura Brahmin, and he's almost got to the point where this Mathura Brahmin also is about to achieve prema. So, next video we'll go get into chapter 6. Thank you very much. I hope you come back for the next video. Hare Krishna.